TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. Welcome back, everybody, to TE Talks, sponsored by Through Eternity Tours. I'm your host, Rob Allen, and on TE Talks, we get to talk with some of the most fascinating people who make a living out of being wonderful storytellers. And just to add on a note, if you enjoyed this podcast and our others, please remember to write a review and give us a rating. It is extremely helpful to get the word out and let other people know about who we are and what we do. And it is incredible free content for people. I don't think many people realize that. Anyway, and also remember that if you have any questions for me or for the guide who is joining me today talking everything Padova, Serena, ciao Serena, we also would like for you to ask us questions. You can write an email to us, office@througheternity.com, about anything about the city of Padova, visiting it, what's the best time of year, how to get there. We're happy to help out. So again, let me introduce my guest today, Serena. Ciao, Serena.
Ciao. Hello,
How are
everyone. Fine, thank you. What about you, Rob?
I'm doing very, very well, and I'm very, very happy to have you on our podcast. Today, everybody, we are going to be talking about the wonderful city of Padova. I'm very excited to talk about this city because, like for many of you, maybe you have never been to the city. And this summer, I went to Padova for the first time. And Serena has been very kind enough to give us her time to talk about the city as well. She is, Serena, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You are from Padova, correct?
Yes, I was born and raised in Padua. So that's my hometown. I really love it. And as all Paduans, I'm very proud of my city. Yes, even though I just spent a few years away from it for my study, then my love for the city drew me back there, and here I am. Now I'm so glad and so lucky to be able to guide people through this wonderful city that always amazes people. People never realize how many things you can see and appreciate in this city, because, you know, we are just 30, 40 kilometers away from Venice, and Venice is the capital city of Veneto region. And maybe everyone speaks about, I don't know, Palladio in Vicenza, Verona in the Arena with the opera. And Padua somehow has always been kind of neglected. Even though it has so many jewels. You also filmed in your wonderful video. I saw a video you took while you were in Padua, and I think you really were wonderful in getting the atmosphere and the main monuments and the symbols of the cities. There's so much we can tell you about that, and I'm sure you will want to come and visit by yourselves.
Yeah, let me just say to everybody, I did fall very much in love with the city. For me, it's very exciting because I do love to travel when I get to see a new place. And, when we talk about, and tourism will get back to normal, but, when you talk about tourism, sometimes some of the other famous areas of Italy get overrun with people. And I almost felt like you have this kind of authentic experience because you do see the Padovans, as you said, living there, the Italians living in this wonderful city. And I'm quite happy to say that what is part of this city can easily be compared and up on the level to these other greats like Florence and Venice. I mean, it absolutely is. And so that's the wonderful thing. It's like almost a hidden gem, walking around through it. And it is a thriving city. It seems to be a very wealthy city. It seems to be also very clean and orderly and safe and just beautiful. I always say, unfortunately, Rome is a little rough around the edges, with the garbage and the graffiti. You don't see that in Padova. You absolutely don't. In the park, when we started our video, there's that beautiful park with all those famous historical figures, the statues. There's this kind of moat around the park. So you have to cross the moat and get to the central river. And that's where we started it. But I want to get down to the nitty gritty because, of course, and I did make a faux pas, everybody. I called the Basilica of San Antonio the Duomo when it is not the Duomo of Padua by any means, but it is absolutely one of the most spectacular churches in Italy, and that is no easy feat. Truly is. It just seemed to have so many different styles in it to me, and so many pieces, gems. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Basilica of San Antonio?
Yes, of course. So this is one of the symbols of the city, together with the Prato della Valle you mentioned, the big square, which is the second largest in Europe, by the way. It's so fascinating. When you come to visit the city, it is wonderful, huge square with 78 statues. You cross, and then through a narrow street, it leads you right to the opening of the view to the Basilica of St. Anthony, which is one of the most important monuments in terms of works of art, because as you said, it's a mixture of different styles, different artists, very famous artists. But there's a reason for that, because this is also the heart of our religion, of our tradition and folklore. That's the basilica where Saint Anthony was buried. And though Saint Anthony was not originally from Padua, because he's called Saint Anthony of Padua, but he was born in Lisbon. And we struggle a lot with the Portuguese about that. But really, he is the saint, the worldwide saint. If you think about it, every single church in every place around the world has either an altar dedicated to him or a picture of him. It's amazing. Everywhere I've been in the world, I've always found an image or a reference to Saint Anthony of Padua, not from. And why is that? Because he was such a miracle maker, such a great man. In his life, he traveled a lot. We were lucky, so to speak, enough to have his body here. He died very young and ill. And so he was in the last part of his life, very, very young, when he died in 1231. And he was buried in this little church of the Franciscan friars, which compared to the one you will see now, you say, how is that possible? Humble order, a very simple order of Franciscan. How is it possible that you have this huge place with so many monuments, Donatello's, Titian, Sansovino, many artists from the 13th century to nowadays. We even have works of art of the 21st century nowadays. Why is that? Because every single century wanted to pay their homage to this saint. We have such a great connection. Even if you're not religious, there's such a great connection to this saint. Before the COVID pandemic, 3 million people came to visit every year to pay homage. And they can't be all religious people, Christians who want to come to ask for miracles. So you will see the tomb. When you go in and the left transept, you will see there is the altar dedicated to his tomb where he's buried. And people go by and touches the tomb because they want this special connection to him. But at the same time, if you don't feel like being there for the spirituality, you can enjoy the wonderful 9 high relief in marble. And among them, the Sansovino one, with the 3 women assisting to the miracles of the drowned girl. And that's amazing. That's amazing. All the atmosphere inside there. And then you have Donatello's high altar with the bronze statues by Donatello. That was the beginning of the Renaissance in Italy, in North Italy, actually. That's how Renaissance came to Padua. We were a Gothic city. We had a lot of wonderful cycles we will talk about later on. But then 1443, 44, Donatello came for 10 years. And together with those wonderful bronze statues, he also left a masterpiece outside. The statue of Gattamelata, the soldier, the mercenary. Realism and at the same time humanism. That's incredible. This old fierce, proud man, true to life, and the first equestrian statue of this kind worldwide, which inspired then all others and was, of course, inspired by Rome, Marco Aurelio, of course.
Marcus Aurelius, of course.
Yeah.
I agree with you when you're saying about the statues of San Antonio. I mean, you do see them. And I think we even have a little shot of it inside the basilica, because there's this kind of cult with him. People love to write messages, these letters of thanks to him. It's kind of like your grazie ricevute, the grace received or whatnot. Isn't he supposed to be the patron saint of lost objects? Like if you've lost something, you find it, you pray to Saint Anthony and he'll help you out.
There's so much. There are so many traditions because it's so spread. It's worship. His worship. It's so spread all over the world. We have this northern tradition of the lost causes. So you pray Saint Anthony. There is a specific prayer. If you lose something, you find it back, and that gets back to the fact that he was helping people find their faiths back. So people who lost their faiths during the heretic time, when there were a lot of heresies and things that went away from the real Christianity, he helped people find themselves back, or family get back together. And that's one of the very famous miracles he did. But on the other side, the Spanish, Portuguese, Southern America tradition is the marriage saint. You probably never heard, but in Lisbon, on the 13th of June, when he died, there is a special day where the city of Lisbon dedicates money and sponsors a young poor couple that get their marriages paid by the municipality in honor and in homage of Saint Anthony. And in Brazil, there is another interesting tradition where you ask for Saint Anthony. When you are a single woman, you ask for Saint Anthony to find your partner. And if he doesn't listen to you, what do? You take a little statue, possibly you can buy it in Padua. You put him head down and you leave him like that with his head and upside down until he finds you a good husband. And believe me, one of the colleagues from Brazil who visited the city told me it works. So, ladies, if you're looking for a partner, you can come to Padua, and he will make sure you find one, and a good one.
It's so funny. My mother is from an Irish Catholic family. And not with St. Anthony, but I remember her telling me specifically that her mother was worried that her oldest sister would never get married. So they went to Quebec, and there's a staircase like the Scala Santa, the Holy Staircase in Rome. And they climbed up the staircase, and it worked because their oldest sister did get married and had 6 children and is now 93 years old. So she's still alive and well.
Wow, see?
Yeah, but you have this wonderful belief, and I adore these concepts of this stuff with people, and you see this as an act of faith. I think it's very, very lovely to see. I have always, because I give tours to the Vatican museums, and when you exit, we always would leave the Sistine Chapel to go to St. Peter's, but sometimes that exit is closed, so you have to go out this regular longer path, and there's a series of many different things that are on display, sometimes gifts that have been presented to the Pope. And one of them is this glorious model of the Basilica of San Antonio. And I've lived in Rome for almost 25 years now, and I had never been, but I've always been curious about it because, as you say, it is a mixture also of these many different styles, because it has the influence of Venice and Byzantine, right? Because of the multiple domes, like the Basilica of St. Mark's in Venice. But then, and you say that it's a great way to observe the transition from Gothic into the Renaissance, because you do seem to see these Gothic elements in the back and in the apse of the church. But they have these bright, brilliant colors. And then the sculpture, the level of the Renaissance sculpture that you see in there is just amazing. We couldn't get so close up to the high altar with Donatello's work around the altar, but you can just say it's stunning. And then the statue on the outside. Now, can I ask you, because I didn't observe and I couldn't tell, is that the original statue still outside, or is it a copy? Oh, it's
Yeah,
the
it's
original
still the
statue.
original. Yeah, it's original statue. So if you could close up or
Hmm.
maybe look through the lenses, you can see really all the details, the frowning on
Hmm.
his forehead, and all the little details on the horse and
Hmm.
on the soldier on Gattamelata. It's incredible. And then don't forget, we also have the Baroque. Baroque is not a big time in
Yes.
Padua in the north of Italy, but then you have the Relics Chapel
Yeah.
with the
We got
wonderful
that.
work by Filippo Parodi. That's incredibly elegant, theatrical. That's
Hmm.
really something that hits the eyes.
Hmm.
And then, of course, for more spiritual people, you can find the three most important relics of the saint there. I don't know
Hmm.
if you know, but we still have the tongue, the preserved tongue of the saint, which was the
Wow.
greatest miracle of all, because right the 32 years after his death, they opened the tomb for the first time. We are in the medieval time, you needed the relics. It was very
Hmm.
important to have something from him. And what you would expect is hair, maybe, or bones.
Hmm.
But at that time, his tongue was still preserved.
Wow.
No damage, any damage at all was there. And it was left like that for many years. And that was the sign for people that because you use your tongue to speak, his words was true. So that's why it was considered a great miracle. And
Hmm.
then somehow around 60, 50 years ago, it damaged a lot. So what you see now, you really need to make sure you have a look. It's very dry, a little dry thing. And again, people interpreted it as his message because after the Second World War, kind of his tongue dried up. It has always been red and living, and it dried up because after so much evil people were able to do at that time, he kind of didn't have anything more to say to the people, but
Wow.
it's still there. And you can see his tongue, they're very damaged, and the vocal cord, the vocal apparatus, which is
Wow.
also amazing from a physical point of view. And it's not preserved in particular atmosphere or formaldehyde or things of the kind. It's just there in the atmosphere in a relics work of art, wonderful work by Florentine Goldsmith. It's incredibly beautiful. And again, this is one of the highlights for the spiritual visits, but even interesting for people who don't believe, because again, it's scientifically incredible to
Hmm.
have it there. So there's so much really you can see. And then the fresco painting, of course. Do we want to come to the important fresco painting cycles of the city of Padua?
Yes, yes. But before we get into that, I did
Yeah.
want to cover a couple of other things. So there are also, I think, at least three amazing courtyards. One has
Yes.
a magnificent magnolia tree that are stunning to go through, and that, as you point out, and what's really lovely was that Baroque chapel, because often I find that Baroque dominates or will take over a place, but there's this amalgamation of all these different styles that seem to work very well within the I see keep on the basilica. I want to call it the Duomo because it's such a magnificent,
Yeah.
dominating piece, but it is not the Duomo of Padua. Yes, now I did want to talk about this because of the wealth of even the economy today. But Padua, can you talk a little bit about the history of it so that we can understand these amazing cycles?
Yeah.
What was the history of Padua? We know that Verona was an ancient Roman city. When was Padua founded? I imagine that for a few centuries it was dominated by the Venetians, and you can see signs of that. But what is its history? What is the economy of it that it had this wealth? Because these cycles, I mean, this is a wealthy city throughout the centuries because one cannot just commission these things without having vast amount of sums to hire artists to come to Padua to do these pieces. So can you tell me a little bit
I'm,
about that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because you'll be very much surprised. Padua is much older than Venice, and
Uh-huh.
it was born more or less the same time as Verona, but at the time of the Romans, it was probably more important or as important than Verona.
Wow.
What makes us apart from Verona, unfortunately, is that our Roman remains are not visible any longer. The city was built before Roman time. We have an old tradition, and I think you filmed it in your walking tour when you took the images of the city at the tomb of Antenore. Antenore's tomb is still present, and it's the traditional old founder of the city. According to the legend, Padua was founded by a Trojan prince, Antenore, a good friend of Aeneas. So we have a connection. So they felt Virgil and even Homer mentioned this Antenore prince. But at the Roman time, they felt the need to highlight the connection between Padua and Rome as being sister cities, so to speak. And Antenore, according to the legend, of course, left Troy and then came on the coast of the Adriatic Sea. We had 2 seas in this area, so that was a strategical place, wonderful for settling down. And it was around the 12th century, of course, before actually the city and the remains you can find in the Civic Museum of Padua, where also the Scrovegni Chapel is. So when you visit the chapel, you can also visit the museum with the same ticket. You will see the remains dates back 9th to 8th century before Christ. And the city developed a lot from a trade point of view because of its very strategical position. Connection to the north and the east and the central Europe, and then west and central Italy. So it was kind of a crossroad and a place for salt or precious material coming from the north, and also connection with other peoples in Italy. And then it gained a lot of importance during the Roman time. And you probably didn't realize because it's not visible, but Prato della Valle, the big square with the statues, underneath it has the remains of a Roman theater of the 1st century after death, and it had 6,000 seats. So you can imagine how big a city it was. If we had 6,000 seats. Unfortunately, all these monuments were either destroyed during the barbarian times, around the 4th, 7th century, and if not destroyed, used to build the other monuments later on. So the Basilica of St. Justina, for example, which is right on the side of the Prato della Valle, was probably built with stones and rocks of marbles and pieces of the theater itself. And even in the city center, if you have to do any works every time when they had, for example, to dig for the new tram line we have in the city, 4 meters underneath, you always find something from the Roman time.
Sure, just like Rome.
Yeah, but unfortunately, there's not much visible in the air, so outside. So everybody thinks that Verona was a much bigger city, more important than Padua, but Padua was same importance as Verona, probably, but more important than Milan at that time.
Sure.
In the Roman time. So it has developed, but what happened after the barbarian time? Total disaster. Probably some of the patrons who left went to the lagoon and the little islands to found Venice. So it's not Venice that founded Padua, the other way around, if I may say so. But my colleagues in Venice will kill me for that, I'm sure of it. Anyway, so when things settled down a little bit, because of the strategic position, religion came back, the bishop came back, and all around the area of the city centers, the cathedral again, that's the central area, the noble families, the area of the market with Palazzo della Ragione and the market square started growing again. Padua became richer and richer, independent, free municipality with its own government, its own statute, everything to protect and foster trade. And it became very rich. And that's how, and we had the second university in Italy, 1222. The University of Padua was founded. We are now celebrating its 1800th anniversary. This is the year to visit Padua, ladies and gentlemen, because Padua Urs Picta enlisted in the World Heritage of UNESCO. Padua University, 800 years of age. That's really the moment to be in Padua. But anyway, so we had not only trade, we also had culture. And that's how great artists, great minds of the time came here. We had Francesco Petrarca, the Petrarch, the great poet, to visit, and he lived and died in an area near Padua because of his connection to the lords of Padua. We had Giotto being invited by the Scrovegni family, who was already the most famous, recognized as the most famous painters of his time, 1303. Giusto de Menabois and other great painters following Giotto's steps, again, great works by him. Dante was also in the town because of the university, because of this great openness of the city, and of course wealth, because trade was very important. The city thrived until 1405, when we dedicated the city to Venice. We acknowledged their power. They were stronger, they were wealthier. And by the time the Carraresi family, the lords of Padua, had to give up, and the city became a Venetian city. Still very important. We still have the Donatello's work in the Basilica, Titian then in the Basilica again, cycles, important cycles anyway. But really the medieval time, that moment between the 12th, 13th century and the 15th century, before 1405, before we became more Venetian, you really have so many works, and you really feel, I call it the Paduanity, la Padovanità of the city in the central area of the market squares.
That's wonderful. Yeah, because then you do get this sense of this unique medieval architecture. Thank you for that overview. That's wonderful. So that gives us an idea. And then you were saying that, so just recently, Padova has been made into the UNESCO site, right? It's been just the city itself. It's not any specific place.
No, to be more precise, it's not the city, but the fresco cycles of the 14th century. So it has been acknowledged as the Urbs Picta, the painted city, because of the so many fresco cycles. Of course, Giotto was the first one, 1303, 1305, and the Scrovegni Chapel, a masterpiece, a wonderful work of art, the most complete, because unfortunately his work in Assisi went mostly lost because of the earthquake, while in Padua they are well preserved. And there is a wonderful way of accessing it and enjoying them with reservation system, and it's very well preserved, and you really must go to see that, because it's Gothic humanism, really. There's such great use of color and feelings and realism already. That's amazing, and you can see it from the pictures you filmed in your video.
Yes, that's right. That's actually very important to point out, because remember, everybody, when you want to go see this, you make sure you have to reserve ahead of time, because even we have very set days of where we were going. It looks like we're all doing it in the same day, but we're not. We couldn't get a reservation. So when we did Padova for a day, then we did Verona, and then we went to Venice, and on our way back from Venice, we were able to reserve a spot. We had to do it days ahead of time, but it's very, very well preserved. They only allow a limited amount of people to come in. It's sealed, airtight to protect, but they allow you to video inside. So it was wonderful. We captured one of the most famous scenes, which is the kiss of Judas, right? That Judas kisses Christ to denote who he is, to be arrested by the Roman soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yes, as you say, it's Gothic humanism. It's at this point then we start to see emotions being put into paintings, going into this movement of realism. People may think of one thing I always try to emphasize, because we have a beautiful Giotto triptych in the Pinacoteca and the Vatican Museums, the Stefaneschi triptych. But it's like Michelangelo, Raphael, all of these wonderful, famous superstars of the Renaissance could not get to where they were without this artist, and that's great too, because in the city of Padova, you get to go to there, but that is the start. And as you said, we have right even next to San Antonio these other fresco cycles right next to it that are of the similar time period. And then later on in the Renaissance, there's this scuola, So could you tell me a little bit about those two, since we were right at the church?
So integral part of this Urbs Picta nomination, you can find the fresco painting by Gualtiero Padovano and Guariento, both inside the Basilica of St. Anthony, because in the right transept, right across where St. Anthony is buried, there is another chapel with the frescoes by... I'm sorry, I can't think of the name now. It's Guariento and... I don't remember his name. I'm sorry.
Jacopo Don't worry, it'll come back.
It will come later, sorry. And this same artist also decorated the oratory, St. George's Oratory, just on the square of the Basilica of St. Anthony, which is very much like Scrovegni Chapel. So after Scrovegni Chapel, all the noble families wanted something similar, because it was also a sign of wealth and power to show off. And in a very similar way, you can find the stories of the patron saints of the family, Lupi di Soragna, represented there. And again, here it's not only Giotto style, the realism, architectonical backgrounds, making the background of these real life stories. So where people could read, so to speak, the stories of the saints, because we should never forget that we're talking about medieval time. Most people couldn't read or write. So art was like comics. So it was for them like reading the book. So through these pictures, they were able to absorb faith, to absorb beliefs, to know the teachings of the religion. So that was both didactic art, but also celebration, because in that particular case, especially in the Oratory of St. George at the Basilica, the family wanted it to be the chapel, the family chapel, the burial family chapel. So you can see there represented faces and people of the time. You can see the portraits of the members of the families themselves. You can find portraits of people of the time. Petrarca, for example, who was very connected with the court and the lords of Padua at that time, or Lombardo della Seta, his secretary. So it's, again, a celebration of the city, of the time, of the wealth of the family, of that moment of great flourishing for the city, but also for us, a celebration of art, a celebration of colors. It's so magnificent. You have these blue colors that are wonderful, and it's really amazing. And then later on, a staircase above, there is the Scoletta with the works by Titians, who was very young, but we had the privilege and we were lucky enough for the friars, the Franciscan friars, to call him and do this, commissioned him these works representing some of the miracles of Saint Anthony. The all paintings are dedicated to Saint Anthony, of course, in this respect. It was a celebration of the saint. It was the Scoletta, the place where the friars and the noble people who managed bread of Saint Anthony, so the help to people who were poor and needed help. This is a very old tradition, and the people who managed the basilica and still manages the basilica, the Arca del Santo, is still in charge of managing the basilica, keeping it open, promoting it to the people. So at that time, they decorated it in honor of the saint. So it represents his life, and in particular, his most famous miracles. And it's incredible how Titian could represent with color this moment of acknowledgement, of realization on how big Saint Anthony was, and how much he did, for example, in the miracle of the wife that was killed by the jealous husband. He thought she had cheated on him, but then he regretted it and he realized he did something wrong. So he went to Saint Anthony, and Saint Anthony resurrected his wife because he saw the repentance. And that's one of the many miracles. Of course, this is stories, but you can
not really good for these times. You can imagine if she came back alive, she could have killed him or smacked him in the face. It's like, oh, no, thank you. Bring me back. Oh, God.
But it's amazing how he uses color rather than architecture for the perspective. That's very Venetian. That's a very Venetian thing, the use of color.
Yes, they're amazing with the colors.
So
I just want to clarify for people. I mean, a lot of you, I'm sure, who are listening do know about artwork, but for those of you who don't, Titian, or Tiziano, as he's called, is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Venetian painter. And he was, of course, alive during he's like one of the superstars of the Renaissance, like Da Vinci or Michelangelo, Raphael. He's considered one of the greatest high Renaissance artists. So it's a big deal. I've got Titian hanging around, coming through, and his young work, because he lived for a very, very long time, like Michelangelo. He died, I think he was in his 80s. So there's an enormous amount of work that belongs to him. Anyway, but I remember one thing, and we do have a shot of it, probably because it picked out to Dylan, who was filming along with me and does all the editing on the videos, of a baby being boiled, like chopped up and in a cauldron being boiled in water, which is just like, you know.
No, it's not. It was not meant to be boiled. What happened, according to the miracle and the story, the mother wanted absolutely to listen to Saint Anthony. He was a great preacher. Again, we talked about his tongue and his way of speaking and how he could move people and help them find the right way. So it seems that this mother left the baby unguarded for some time to go and listen to the preacher, the preaching of Saint Anthony, and the baby fell into the hot water and died. So Saint Anthony again knew about that and went to rescue and saved the baby, and he brought him back to.
Wow, he brought a few people back to life. Wow.
Yeah, they say so. Yeah, so there are many miracles of this kind. Showing how Saint Anthony really cared about people, their lives, their faith. He tried to convince people to go back on the right path. And he helped people repent, find somehow their true selves. Because we don't know how many of these miracles are true and how many are not. But for sure, all the ex-votos you see around the tomb and in the museum dedicated to the devotion of Saint Anthony and in one of the courtyards of the monastery, they are all acknowledged miracles. So these miracles that were represented by the different artists in the Scoletta in the 16th century represent the most common, traditional, popular, so to speak, miracles everybody spoke of at that time, but they're not necessarily all recognized. but all other miracles that are told or recounted in these ex votos you can see, they were all recognized by the Pope, by the commission. There are commissions, and he is the only I'm aware of, so I might be wrong, but I think he is the only person in the world who was proclaimed saint just 1 year after his death. You know how long it takes to be proclaimed a saint, first a blessed,
like
and then
years usually.
And he was the only one. So great was his fame as a miracle maker, as a preacher, as a man, that it only took him 1 year to be proclaimed saint.
Interesting. Now, to get on to a little bit about, because, and we will talk about the Duomo and the baptistry. I want to finish up with that, but let's just talk also about the city itself. It has these lovely porticoed areas that reminded me of Bologna, because I guess the weather can be very rainy, but I mean, it's just wonderful to walk through them where you go through. There's also lovely streets with apartments. I remember I captured this beautiful apartment that was a bit run down, but they had these just magnificent flowers hanging from the windows and this kind of great life of the city. You and I had already previously talked about this. There is this great culture of food, the food markets, but also about these lovely small businesses. You know, so many cities, and I live I'm living in between Rome and London. London is especially, it seems to me, and even in Oxford and Cambridge that I both visited, is filled with chains. You know, it's like you find the same Pret a Manger, all these similar chains of coffee places in London, you know, but in Italy in generally, there are a lot less of this, but exceptional in Padua, you don't really see any chain restaurants. You don't really see these massive chain stores. You see a lot of beautiful, I saw some great men's clothing stores. I was on a budget, so I couldn't go really shopping, but I certainly looked through the windows and I saw a haberdashery shop. I saw, I guess, can you tell us a little bit about that, the food culture, and then that wonderful, unique coffee that is served in a famous bar in Padova that has a special flavor?
So honestly, being a Paduan of birth and having witnessed the evolution of the city, I must say that 10 years ago, it was even more authentic and more local. So we do have chains nowadays for food and for even for clothing and things of the kind. But it is true, authenticity is something that really sets Padua apart from any other art cities, very famous. Because, for example, in the city center, you have this market square where every day except Sunday, because still on Sunday we are free. Thank God, differently from department stores and things of the kind. So every day from Monday to Saturday, we have a fresh fruit and vegetable market. Outside on the two sides of the Palazzo della Ragione, the very big old Justice Palace, medieval Justice Palace that's in the center, and underneath the Justice Palace, right as in the past, in the medieval time, it was built 1218 and then restructured as it is now between 1309 and later on the 15th century. But basically it was built around the 13th century. And the first floor was and has always been the covered market. It's really similar to these Arab sukkahs, you can call it, these Arab markets. And all the little shops there are very typical. You can find cheese, meat, fish, everyday produce. People eat on their tables every day. So the Paduans go shopping every day, fresh fruit and vegetable outside, and everything else can be found inside. And so if you go through these little shops along the two galleries on the on the ground floor of Palazzo della Ragione, you can really feel everyday life. You can really go shopping where the Paduans go shopping. You can have prosciutto di Montagnana, our Parma ham
cured
in the Paduan version, or the typical cheeses, we have the sausages, and then you have these little open air bars where you can have your spritz or your prosecco glass or whatever you prefer, or one of the glasses from the Uganian Hills nearby, and your kind of cicchetto. We also have this tradition of the aperitif time, so you can have the mortadella or a porchetta sandwich, the very big tramezzini. Have you seen them? They are so thick. They're so thick. There's everything in it. And you can have your tramezzino or your little bun with I don't know, I say porchetta because that's my favorite, but you can have everything in it, really, cheese or other cold cuts. And then you drink your prosecco or your spritz, according what's your liking, and sitting there and see life go through, because every day from the morning till the evening, you have something going on. Sure. The market in the morning, and then the students going around in the afternoon, or people going shopping. So it's changing. Probably the pandemic has changed a little bit, even habits. But from what I get, the Paduans really like living their cities the way it is and the way they always done. And I hope it will keep on being like that, because what's peculiar about this city and what really makes it a great city, so interesting and such a nice place to live in, is the fact that the Paduans are one thing with their city and the city center, and they're very proud and in love with their city, I must say.
Well, they should certainly be. Can you tell us about, because we were very intrigued by it. We had heard about it. I think most people do when they come to Padova, the mint coffee.
Of course. Then, of course, after your shopping and you're walking, because there's a much to work in Padua, even though it's you might think it's a small medieval town where everything is there. Walking from St. Anthony's Basilica or the Prato della Valle area to the city center is a walk. It's around a kilometer. So after you have your nice walk through the city, the medieval little narrow streets of the city, you can enjoy a little break at the Café Pedrocchi, the historical cafe. Every city has its historical cafe. We have Pedrocchi, 1831, associated with the story of liberation of the town, because in that cafe, the first students and Paduans fought for their freedom against the Austrian in 1848. Okay. And it's a cafe that Pedrocchi built for the city, with different rooms on the ground floor dedicated to the different categories of the citizens. You have the red room in the middle, the yellow room that is now the room where you can have the Café Pedrocchi at the counter without paying any extra price. You just pay more if you sit down. But if you get your coffee at the counter, you pay as much as everywhere else. Make sure you try the specialty. That's Café Pedrocchi, as the name of the owner. And Café Pedrocchi is a very special, old and secret recipe by Antonio Pedrocchi himself that mixes a very good quality of coffee, Arabic blending, and on it you will find a mint cream with a little bit of cacao on it, sprayed on it. And the combination of hot coffee and cool mint, coffee must not have any sugar in it, because there's already something in the mint preparation, which is cool. So it's this mixture of bitter and sweet, cold, hot and cold, all at once in your mouth. It's the size of a cappuccino, basically. Yeah. It's really good. Amazing. It's something you cannot describe. Yeah.
It's quite refreshing. It's quite refreshing. It's a lovely thing. I think one could probably drink it all year long. It was quite interesting. It was beautiful to look at because of the beautiful mint colored green that was mixed in with the coffee. I mean, I've never had mint coffee, and it's Fortunately, not copied anywhere else. So if you want to try your mint
Yeah,
copy, you have to go to Padua to get it. Well, to round
exactly.
things up, Serena, because we've covered a lot of
Yeah,
stuff, is that the Duomo, the actual Duomo, is very beautiful in a different way because of the famous painting fresco cycles all over the city. This is the Duomo. The facade is fairly simple, and inside it is almost a beautiful, clean white stucco that's all everywhere. It's very simple. If I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
if I remember correctly, it seems almost a bit a kind of controlled baroque. And then right next to it is this amazing baptistry that again has phenomenal frescoes within it. Can you just tell me a little bit about
yeah.
these places?
So our cathedral is not very has not a very lucky story, or rather, it's the cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
We had a wonderful Romanesque of the Romanesque time, the 12th, 13th century building,
Mm-hmm.
which had to be renovated and restructured because after building St. Anthony's Basilica, everybody wanted to go there and thought that was the most important church. So around the 14th, 15th century, they asked for a new project, a Renaissance project, a very big one. There's
Mm-hmm.
also the name of Michelangelo among the architects who presented a project to rebuild the cathedral. And
Mm-hmm.
it was probably also inspired somehow by a project he presented, but there's no documentation about that. And so they started building it, but somehow the money was not enough. So the architectural structure is there, is wonderful, but it's incomplete. The facade was
Mm-hmm.
never finished because there was no money. And even inside, they started decorating it. But of course, that was the time when Padua was not independent anymore, was
Mm-hmm.
not so wealthy anymore. And so somehow the decoration is not so precious and so incredible as what you see in the Basilica of St. Anthony, though there are interesting works of art, witnesses to the importance of the church itself, burial sites of important bishops of the town, and this wonderful high altar that's a work of art, a modern work of art of the 20th
Yes.
century. That's also very interesting because we always overlook the modern art. We like medieval time, we like the fresco painting of the 14th century, but of course then art develops. But what's really amazing of the area, as you mentioned, is the baptistry with the fresco painting by Giusto de Menabuoi. Giusto de Menabuoi, again, not a Paduan as Giotto, but living and working in Padua. He
Mm-hmm.
was called by the lords of Padua at that time because the baptistry was meant to be the chapel, the family chapel, the burial family chapel of the family Carraresi, who were the lords of Padua. And that
Yes.
had to show the magnificence, the wealth, the importance of the lords. And if you see the colors, that blue, the lapis lazuli blue is amazing. And again, there you can see a representation of the court of the time with members of the family represented there, important people of the time represented there, just like in the oratory of St. George, you can find the portrait again of Petrarca, Francesco Petrarca, his secretary, Francesco Petrarca, the Lord of Padua, who commissioned this work. And Giusto de Menabuoi, that's incredible, left there the most complete cycle of the history of Christian religion, starting from the ancient Testament, the Old Testament, in the ceiling, with the 37 episodes of the Old Testament, right to the Apocalypse. So it's not just a cycle about the life of Jesus or the life of Mary or the
Everything.
life of the patron saints. You can see everything, the old story from the old times, the Old Testament, to the newest and the most modern, what's maybe awaiting us in the apocalypse, represented there
Wow.
on the
So from the
four
beginning to the
walls.
end,
Yes, really. That
up until
makes
the end.
it so great. not only from the artistic point of view, but also from the meaning. And that's so elegant and so precious. It then was transformed into a baptistry again, because when the Venetian came, of course, the lords of Padua had no saying. They were completely cancelled, erased from history. Their palazzo was completely restructured or destroyed. But at least the paintings were preserved. So it lost its original function as a burial chapel. So you can see there is an arch where there was the sarcophag of Fina Buzzaccarini, the wife, but it was taken away, cancelled with 15 very bad painting. You will see somehow, when you go inside, you will see the wonderful paintings and then a little part on a wall that's completely different, and it seems strange. That's because there was the sarcophag, and it was substituted later on during the Venetian time. But still, that's part of the fresco cycles of the Urbs Picta, and for a good
I was always wondering about it, why it was so sumptuously decorated, because mostly when you have a baptistry, the classical thing is to depict the story of John the Baptist, or in the cycle of Christ, not the entire whole shebang. And that's an interesting point. I will look out for the videos to see where the sarcophagus was removed and to see that different style. Now, thank you again so much, Serena. But I do want to mention one thing, because the first time when we spoke about this, you mentioned, because Padua has this wonderful university, and we got to check out the beautiful botanical gardens there. You mentioned the first woman to ever graduate university. Can we just tell us a little bit about this person?
Yeah, so there's material to prepare another 2 podcasts if you want, but yes, we must make sure to mention Elena Lucrezia Cornaro Piscopia. She was the first woman in the world to graduate at the university, 1678. An amazing story. I don't want to tell all the story here, not to spoil your visit in Padua. When you come to Padua, I will. You can see her statue in a courtyard, in the old courtyard of the university, just right on the steps of the staircase. You can see her, and she's buried in the Basilica of Saint Justina, where she died because she dedicated her life to study. And it's amazing, because at that time, women of course couldn't attend lessons. So she had to study by herself with private teachers paid by her father, who was a very rich man, a Cornaro, a noble rich man. And she wanted so much to make her dissertation. And at that time, it was the bishop allowing students to make dissertations. She needed a special permission. So you have to think how much this woman must have insisted to have the possibility to dissert her thesis in philosophy. That was the only topic she was allowed to discuss. She was much more educated in canonic law and other type of law. And she finally got her graduation, 1678. Really incredible.
So many different things. That's amazing. I will look this story up to learn more, because of course I will come to see you and meet you in person. Padova has so much to offer, and I mean, one could just spend days at the Basilica of San Antonio, among other things, and going through the markets. Thank you so much, Serena. It really was a true pleasure to be able to talk with you all about this. It's a true gift, and I very, very much appreciate this. And of course, everybody that you're hearing this, if you do have any questions about what we discussed today, we can talk about also how to get reservations for the Scrivini Chapel, office@througheternity.com. And thanks again to Through Eternity Tours. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok even, and many other different social media platforms. So please join in and look us up when you travel to Italy. Thanks very much, Serena. Ciao for now.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I'll wait for you in Padua. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.